You might wonder why a hairy-eared engineer, as we are called at Stanford, would ever want to fuss around with the trees on a sand plain as flat as a pancake, such as Big Flats in Adams County. I suppose my early background had something to do with it. For my father and I used to hike up to the Pine Flats in the San Gabriel Mountains of Southern California and enjoy the magnificent bull pines, Western Yellow and Jeffrey, to be found in that area. Later on, I became a desert rat, fighting sagebrush and Joshua trees while working in the Mojave Desert, clearing land and planting pear trees on 1,000 acres of homestead. So, sand and trees had an allure, further heightened by Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac, which Mrs. Munson and I enjoyed reading after our arrival in Wisconsin in 1942. This book developed our desires to explore firsthand some of the experiences Leopold described. So, in 1954, we acquired our first Forest 80, which was expanded to 240 acres by 1959. We had originally hoped to acquire a sufficient number of 40s with age stands graduated to permit modest yearly harvest on a continuous basis. However, we were unable to realize this objective, so we are making do with what we have. And I might add, we are probably having as much pleasure trying to fit the pieces together as we would have under the original plan. Forest Service and other studies indicate that the small timber landowner, that is, the farmer and non-industrial owner, holds more than 60% of the forest lands in the United States, and these lands, for the most part, are inadequately managed, even for the modest production of forest products. It is also estimated that with our growing needs for forest products, the large landowners, industrial, and government will be unable to keep pace with the demand. It thus becomes essential that a large share of the small private holdings come under enlightened management to ensure continuity of this renewable resource and to meet the growing demand. In 1974, Congress recognized the situation and need for increased management practices on small holdings and enacted the Forest Incentives Program, which was part of a larger conservation program. The Forest Incentives Program was designed to increase the small landowners' consistent commitment to long-range forest management goals. Under this program, all forest management practices for a given holding are treated as a package, and assistance given under a 5 or 10-year binding contract rather than assisting on a single practice as heretofore. Initial results indicate considerable small owner interest, and as a secondary benefit, during the short period of operation last year, it was estimated that the program generated 360,000 man-days of employment in rural areas. Now, back to Wisconsin. After acquiring the property, our first step was to discuss plans with our district forester, Mr. Holt, and the county agent, Mr. Les Schmidt. This resulted in the development of management plans by the Division of Natural Resources for the various areas as follows. 1. Clearing the old fields preparatory to planting seedlings and planting the seedlings which were obtained from the DNR nursery. 2. Releasing second growth jack and white pine stands by harvesting the competing oak and by selective cutting of the pine. 3. Timber stand improvements through thinning and pruning of the older plantations. 4. Harvesting saleable growth by clear cutting and replanting where necessary. 5. Setting aside stream bottomland and other suitable areas for game refuge and providing slash piles for the same purpose where possible. And 6. Maintaining roads and fire breaks for fire protection. Since our funds and time were limited, we embarked on the planting schedule as the first priority. This program was completed in less than 10 years on the 100 acres of old fields, using 130,000 seedlings. The other practices were sandwiched as time and funds permitted. Assistance was obtained from time to time through Agricultural Soil and Stabilization Programs, ASCS, in consultation with the DNR foresters. The foresters also marked trees suitable for harvesting or thinning. These cooperative efforts served as incentives for us, as well as providing rewarding experiences in our dealings with the state and federal personnel concerned. They sustained our morale. I might add, the reverse might have been true on one occasion, due to our ignorance of our definition of snow cover. This occurred one Thanksgiving Day when we were busily engaged in clearing and burning wolf trees from an old field preparatory to planting, when the Friendship Forest Ranger appeared, having left his dinner to investigate the fire. And we learned that the snow cover on the ground must completely cover the ground before burning was permitted, rather than in patches as it was at the time, and boy, was our face red. Now, just a few observations and experiences. The operation of tree farms for Christmas tree production was about at its peak during our initial planting. However, one needed a market and time to make a business of it. This required, and still does require, the planting of popular species of Scotch pine and successive 5 to 8 yearly shearings. We had hoped to cut and sell a few red pines for Christmas trees, but found the time was not always available to shear them, and the market was hard to find. This operation of farming was fairly successful, but our time was too limited at the critical periods, so we graduated to longer-range products of pulpwood, posts, poles, and lumber. Someone, however, did find our experiments with shaping productive enough to warrant stealing some 200 trees over a 2-year period. But we've been fortunate in not having any major fires to date and only minor damage from insects and other sources, with 2 exceptions. 1, oak wilt has caused the loss of nearly all the second-growth black and red oak. And 2, mature jack pine stands were extensively damaged 2 years ago by ice formations on the treetops, coupled with high winds which sheared off the treetops. The result looked as if the area had been bombarded by artillery. And some minor damage resulted from a number of things. 1, spot loss of 8 to 12-year-old red and jack pine from massive attacks of bark beetle, generated by adjacent pine slashings which harbored the beetle and permitted a population explosion. 2, the jack pine in the older windbreak plantations suffered severe loss through the root collar weevils. 3, the white pine in the older windbreak plantations suffered from loss from the tip weevil. And 4, 2-year-old plantations have suffered from mice stripping the bark from the tree stems and killing the seedlings. This appears to happen in grassy areas under favorable snow accumulation conditions, which preserves their runways during the winter. And 5, trespass damage, due to cars and snowmobiles running over recently planted areas, in addition to the stolen Christmas trees I mentioned. Earlier, an adjacent woodcutter used a long axe handle and clear-cut 7 acres of our jack pine. This resulted in damage receipts of double stumpage, but upset our management plans by removing the trees at the time of maximum growth. However, it wasn't a complete loss, since this contact led to the acquisition of the adjacent 40. And while the above experiences are disagreeable and upsetting at the time of their occurrence, they don't even begin to outweigh the challenging and enjoyable aspects of the project, one which will keep our interests and energies involved indefinitely. Now I'd like to show a few slides.